All right, so picture this, right? You're in a room, and it's silent,
Oh.
except for this one guy, David Mosic.
Mm.
And he's talking about surviving Auschwitz. Like, he's describing the snow falling on these, like, bodies and talking about losing his mom in the gas chamber.
Wow.
And it's, like, super heavy stuff, right? But it's something we need to hear, especially with all the, like, anti-Semitism going on. So we're going to deep dive into these Holocaust survivor stories.
Yeah.
And we've got this CBC article about David Mosic. It's pretty powerful. So we're going to look at his testimony and, like, what it means today,
Mm.
Why are these stories so important now? And, like, what can we actually learn from them?
I think for me, what always gets me is like how these personal stories, like Mosic's, really bring this huge historical event down to earth,
Yeah.
We all know, like, about the 6 million Jewish people who were murdered, but when you hear him talk about the snow and the bodies,
Yeah.
it's like a punch in the gut, right? It reminds you that these weren't just numbers.
Yeah.
They were people with families, hopes, dreams, just like us.
Exactly. And, like, the article said Mosic was only 14 when he went through all this.
No, wow.
I mean, could you even imagine
Yeah.
being 14 and ripped away from your life, thrown into that nightmare?
I mean, it's almost impossible to wrap your head around, right? And it's like we have to remember that this wasn't just some isolated thing, right?
Yeah.
Anti-Semitism, it has these deep roots going way back. We're
Yeah.
talking centuries of discrimination and prejudice and violence against Jewish people,
Right.
Often starting from these religious differences and then morphing into these really dangerous stereotypes.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not just ancient history either. I mean, the article talked about that guy at the Capitol riot wearing that Camp Auschwitz sweatshirt.
Oh, yeah, that was messed up. It's just, like, such a blatant reminder that the ideas behind the Holocaust are still out there,
Yeah.
Those symbols, they're not just about history. They represent a real threat. And it directly ties back to what Mosic went through, right?
Mm.
It's a huge slap in the face to survivors.
Sure.
And a chilling reminder of what hate can actually lead to.
And the thing is, there are so few survivors left.
Yeah.
The article said less than 6,000 in Canada.
Wow.
And so it feels like we're in this race against time to hear their stories and learn from them.
Yeah, absolutely, because they're not just about the past.
Right.
They're warnings for right now and the future, We have to be so vigilant and recognize these signs of hate before they explode.
And, like, we are seeing those signs, right? The article talked about synagogues being firebombed, kids being bullied in schools just because they're Jewish.
It's awful.
Yeah, it's a really scary reality.
And, we can totally trace these things back to the Holocaust. Like,
Yeah.
It didn't happen overnight, right? It was
Yeah.
years of this escalating prejudice and discrimination that just built and built.
Yeah.
And that's why these stories are so important.
Yeah.
They remind us of the human cost of hate and what can happen if we let it fester.
There was one thing in the article that really stuck with me. It said that Mosic's granddaughter sees his life as like a history book.
Oh, wow.
Isn't that powerful?
Yeah, that's the beauty of, like, stories passing down through generations, These memories and lessons stay alive even as the people who live through it start to disappear.
Yeah, that's so true. So if we were to sum this all up,
Yeah.
the big takeaway is these stories, they really matter. And listening to survivors like David Mosic, especially now with anti-Semitism on the rise, is more important than ever, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, this leads to a really important question for all of us. Like, it's one thing to remember what happened,
Yeah.
but what are we actually doing to fight prejudice and discrimination in our own lives? What can we do, even in small ways, to make sure history doesn't repeat itself? It's something we all need to think about.
Yeah, for sure. Some heavy stuff to think about.
Definitely. But really important.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, that's our deep dive for today. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Thanks for having me.